Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Hawkeye football beat reporter John Steppe. I am joined today by Mike Carmin from the Lafayette Journal and Courier. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
So first of all, for somebody who maybe hasn't seen much of Purdue play, what's kind of the scouting report for this 2021 Boilermaker team?
Well, they get in the red zone and they don't score touchdowns.
That sounds like that would be a little frustrating for fans there.
They've scored 13 points in the last three games, each game. 1 touchdown, 2 field goals.
I'm guessing fans are a little antsy then about that.
Well, they had a chance to be 4-1 coming out of the Minnesota game, which would have been ideal for them. But it didn't work out because they couldn't score touchdowns in the red zone. And they've had a problem beating Minnesota ever since PJ came. So it's just one of those things. It would have been the best case scenario for Purdue, 3-2. You know, as you look long term of where they need to be and getting into a bowl game, it's not out of the question that they could still reach the 6-win mark, but being 4-1 would have been a much better situation for them going into the second part of the season, where they have Iowa this week, Wisconsin, Michigan State, which at the beginning of the year you didn't think would be as good as they are right now. They still have Ohio State to play. They still have to go to Nebraska. They still have the matchup with Indiana. So they had a chance in the first 5 games, put themselves in a better position. But when you don't score touchdowns in the red zone, this is what happens.
That's a tough draw too from the East Division to face those.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the year, you didn't think Michigan State would be 6-0 right now.
No, I wouldn't have bet on that.
No, they're always going to play Indiana because that's the crossover rivalry, and it just as it rotates through, this is the year they get Ohio State along with Michigan State, two teams that are really good right now, and but it's the Big Ten. I think we're getting into the part of the schedule now where teams are going to take some losses and things are going to kind of separate themselves, I think, as we get through the month of October.
So offensively, it seems like if I was looking at things right, they do a 2-quarterback system.
Well, not necessarily a 2-quarterback system. They've started 2 different guys this year. Jack Plummer was named the starter coming out of camp. And then they made a change to Aiden O'Connell going into the last game against Minnesota. Now, they did play another quarterback against Minnesota, Austin Burton, who's more of a dual threat quarterback, gives them a bit of a runner, more mobility there at that position, that they can do some different things on short yardage situations, because they just have not been able to generate a consistent running game this year. And they've been last in the Big Ten in rushing yardage the last 2 years. So they're just trying to find some different ways to run the ball. I wouldn't call it a 2-quarterback system. Jeff Brom's not afraid to put in a new quarterback or a different quarterback if things aren't going well. And you see it across college football all the time. Mm-hmm. And, that's where I think a guy like Austin Burton can help them in some short yardage situation and may help them solve some of their red zone issues. If you can get him out on the edge and some zone reads or some options and make the defense kind of commit one way or the other, maybe you can pick up a much needed touchdown or a much needed first down that way.
As opposed to the continued going only for field goals in the red zone.
Well, or just, David Bell's got 8 people around him, so maybe you should throw to somebody else type of thing. But I think their inability to run the ball traditionally is causing them problems in the red zone, because you've got to be able to get some yardage on the ground, just because you don't have as much space to throw down there when you're at the 20, the 15, or the 10. It just, space is a premium commodity at that point. So they got to figure out a way to generate some yards on the ground in the red zone.
And you were just mentioning David Bell there. It sounds like he's quite the talent there at wide receiver, but it sounds like defenses also are well aware of that too.
Very much so. I mean, David's their best player on offense, and he's played like that just about in every game that he plays. talented wide receiver. I know Iowa really wanted him coming out of Indianapolis, but he's made a pretty good name for himself at Purdue. I mean, he is their number one receiver. He's going to get double covered, but that doesn't seem to stop him. He'll go up and get balls. He's very fluid in his motion, his route running. Great hands. He's the fastest receiver in Purdue history to get 2,000 yards, not just in 40 times, but as far as getting to 2,000 yards faster than anybody.
Wow.
So yeah, he's going to command a lot of attention, and that, in theory, should open up some things for other people, but it hasn't always worked that way.
And then what should people expect defensively from Purdue?
It's a much better group than it was a year ago. They did hold Iowa to 20 points last season in the opener at Ross-Ade. But it's a team that's playing a little bit more aggressive. Their defensive front has come a long way in a year, led by George Karlaftis at defensive end. He's their best defensive player. The team in general doesn't have a lot of sacks, but they have a lot of pressures. They have a lot of hurries. They just haven't had that game or two where they're racking up 4 or 5 sacks. They're getting in the backfield, led by George and some other guys on that defensive line, but they haven't just come up with sacks. They are impacting the quarterback in a way, but not where he's losing yardage all the time. So linebackers are okay, maybe not to strength. They're going to get a cornerback returning this week, Corey Trice, one of their better defensive players, long, lanky, athletic kid who's going to play cornerback for them. So that'll be a bonus for them, where they've been relying on 2 guys the last 3 games to play all the snaps, and I think they get worn down a little bit. But defense is, Jeff Brown made a bunch of changes in the offseason, coaching wise, brought in 4 new defensive coaches, and that move has paid off up to this point.
I don't think too many Iowa fans are looking forward to an improved defense after remembering what happened last time around.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just it's a more organized defense. It's one that is playing forward instead of on their heels. They challenge more routes in the secondary. As I said, their defensive line really has gotten good pressure. They've given up some rushing yardage, as all teams do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, you'd have to look at last year and then look at this year to see the difference. And there is a difference, and they are playing better, and their defense has kept them in every game up to this point, but they need their offense to kind of jump in and say, here, we'll do something, and like score a touchdown in the red zone, which would be good for them.
And then from an injury standpoint, Iowa was doing great until then Riley Moss went down in the Penn State game. How is Purdue doing health-wise for this time of year?
Well, they're still without their top running back, Xander Horvath, who suffered a broken fibula against Connecticut in the second game of the year. He will not be back this week, maybe next week, maybe the end of the month. But as I mentioned earlier, Corey Trice will come back this week after an ankle injury. He's missed the last 3 games. Tight end Payne Durham is expected back. He's missed the last game and a half. He got concussed in the Illinois game, and he's been in protocol the last couple of weeks, but he practiced Sunday, and it appears all systems are go. David Bell took a big shot against Notre Dame. He missed a game, but he played last week against Minnesota. And they've had some other guys in and out of the lineup, but Horvath's probably the big one that won't play. I think everybody else, as far as I know, when we're taping this, I think everybody else's would be good to go right now.
Okay. Wow. It sounds like Purdue then has been hit a little bit with the injury bug.
Yeah, they took some lumps in the first 5 games, been in and out, but they were able to beat Illinois without David Bell and some of the other guys. The running back King DeRue missed the Illinois game, but he was back from Minnesota. If they can get all their number 1 players on the field, obviously they like their chances better, and they like what they can do for them. But football is, that's why you have 85 scholarship players and two too deep depth charts because you need more guys, and that's where the difference is probably with Purdue and some other programs. They just don't have the depth that a lot of other places have.
Yeah, I think the most prior to that Riley Moss injury for Iowa, the worst one was Kyler's shot on the offensive line. It was the most Iowa injury ever. It was from a hay baling accident.
Well,
I don't think you can get any more Iowa than that.
Well, unless he was like in the cornfield. I don't know.
Where apparently he was jumping off a hay bale and landed funny or something, which I guess would make sense considering a big D1 Big Ten offensive lineman jumping off a hay bale. Yeah, maybe a little risky there.
I know what would happen if I jumped off a hay bale. It would not be good.
Do you have a score prediction yet for?
Oh, I haven't formulated a score yet. I mean, obviously Iowa is a favorite, and Iowa has done everything right up to this point. Their defense is getting turnovers. The offense is taking advantage. They're very solid defensively. It's very hard to score on them. And I think reading and listening today, I believe that, and you would know more than I, that the starting quarterback from each of the opponents, only one guy has finished the game. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it was just Colorado State, I believe. I think that was the one that didn't finish, or that did finish.
Whether it was performance or injury related.
Yeah, it's been incredible to see it. And some of those are incredibly well-regarded quarterbacks going into it. Like Talia Tagovailoa, I saw one tweet that was, granted it's a tweet, so take it for what it's worth. But I saw one thing that was kind of putting him almost in the Heisman conversation before that. And then I was thinking in College Park, I don't think he's going to be in the Heisman conversation anymore after that one. That was ugly one. Interceptions? He had, I think, 5 of the 6. I think the 6th one was the backup quarterback. So that one was kind of garbage time. But still 5 after, I don't think he had more than 2 in a game before that. It was incredible, where I was thinking, okay, 4, that's done. As I'm writing my recap, it's like, okay, I can put that number in. Oh, wait, nope. Got to change that to 5. Oh, wait, got to change that to 6. So
if Purdue has to go to another quarterback for whatever reason, at least, because I assume Aiden O'Connell will start, and then if they have to go to Jack Plummer, it's a guy that, the one difference maybe between Purdue and some of the other teams that they've played is that Purdue has a backup that has actually played and started. So that if they have to go that route, at least they're comfortable with someone with some experience. But it's just, I thought that was an interesting stat that Iowa has forced teams to get to their backup quarterback for different reasons.
Oh yeah.
But obviously that changed the game on Saturday for Iowa and Penn State.
I don't know if Iowa wins that, if Sean Clifford can play both halves.
Well, one wouldn't think so. I mean, the way that they were moving the ball and the way they were running the offense, and they seemed to have a pretty good handle on the Iowa's defense, that you had to respect both the pass and the run. But when the backup got in there, you didn't really, they didn't, I don't think they respected either part of his game because he didn't have that kind of experience. The one thing I noticed in watching the game was that when they played fast, that is Penn State, they seemed to have some success.
Oh yeah.
But for whatever reason, they were not able to maintain that or sustain that, or didn't feel like that was the way to go as they got deeper into the game. But yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say, well, yeah, Clifford stays and Penn State wins. Yeah, it's easy to say that, but Iowa's defense is really good.
Oh yeah, you don't know how many more interceptions there would have been.
Right. You just don't know how a game unfolds in that situation. But quickly it became a field position game that I was willing to play, which they play every week when you get right down to it. That if they could just keep Penn State backed up, then they would make the mistakes that they needed to make. And to me, the most fascinating thing was, and I went back and looked it up. I hope that number was correct, but 8 false starts.
Yes, that was correct.
Offense. 8
Kinnick
false
was
starts.
louder than I think anything I've seen before. It was quite the environment, where one person took a picture of their Apple Watch during the game, and it has the noise like warnings when you're in a really loud setting. And the watch hit 117 decibels.
Wow.
Which I think is like a jet engine, if I remember correctly. So it was a loud environment, where one of the team photographers tweeted about how he thought that his custom earplugs weren't in because his ears were starting to ring. And he realized they were in. It was just that loud.
No, I mean, it was loud on TV, but I can imagine being there. It really probably went up even higher. But,
yeah,
obviously Purdue can't get itself in that situation. I doubt the crowd's going to need to be that loud this week.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to get the same excitement. Fox Big Noon kickoff isn't going to be rolling up on the Pentacrest this week.
Well, which, could play into Purdue's favor a little bit. I mean, I think the most popular word around Iowa City, either way you want to use it, is letdown. How do they avoid it? How can Purdue take advantage of it? How do you gear back up again to play? And, Kurt Ferentz has been through situations like this 1,000 times. So he'll have his team ready, but there's a natural letdown, probably going to happen at some point, just because that's human nature. And and Purdue just, number one, Purdue doesn't have a number by its name. And number two, Purdue is, Purdue, and that doesn't really cause opposing teams to get that excited about Purdue coming to town. So, if that can work in Purdue's favor, they need a lot of things, I think, to work in their favor for this game. If that's one of them, then maybe they can hang around and have an opportunity at some point to make a play and change things up a little bit.
Yeah, well, people have been using the word trap game a lot. I've already heard it a fair amount because, as you were saying, it is, Penn State, you're kind of getting up real excited, and then Purdue, it just doesn't have the same ring to it as number 3 versus number 4. And you aren't going to have the same, you can try to prepare the same way as you do every week. Kind of the cliche there that we hear all the time, but it's still different when you don't have the media attention that you're getting going into a top 5 matchup, when you're not getting the classmates visit or saying things to you in class about it, when you're not getting the messages from family who obviously has not been told by Kurt Ferentz several times that it's just any other game. So,
well, I assume today, Sunday and today, they're getting pats on the back from their classmates and messages on social media and their phone about how great it was. The sooner they let that go, the better off they're going to be. But if stuff like that lingers into the week and it hurts the preparation or just hurts the focus, you do open the door, because Purdue does have some weapons. Maybe their key is just not to get in the red zone and score before they get to the red zone and do it that way.
21 each drive.
Right. Yeah. But you have to keep in mind, Jeff Brom is 3-1 against Kurt Ferentz. So, they've had some success against Iowa. Doesn't mean that it's going to continue, but they formulated something to beat Iowa 3 times in 4 years. So it is a bit of a trap game for Iowa, but I think at the end of the game, they probably get themselves, if there is any hiccups, they probably get that straightened out and probably, get on with a victory. Yeah.
People were talking about the 24-hour rule a lot after Saturday, where, we have 24 hours to celebrate this. Ferentz emphasized celebrating safely. Iowa City, when I left Kinnick, it was probably like 11:30-ish. And I did make a stop through downtown Iowa City, and people did seem to be enjoying themselves. There weren't any cars being flipped or anything crazy, but
Well, they haven't won anything yet, really.
yeah, still
Other
got
than
some time there.
yes, they're 6-0. They got 6 more games, so they haven't won anything to set a couch on fire yet. Go 12-0, then they can set a couch on fire.
Well, Mike, thanks for joining me.
Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. A pleasure talking about the game Saturday, and look forward to it coming up.
Yes, I will see you at Kinnick on Saturday.
All right. Thank you.
The next guest on the Hawk Off the Press podcast is our higher education reporter, Vanessa Miller. Vanessa, thanks for joining me.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Well, a lot to discuss here with this Title IX lawsuit. So for someone who maybe didn't see your article, what's kind of the basic summary of what happened last week?
Yeah, well, I guess what happened last week stems to what happened last year, which is around in the summer months, kind of looking at the fallout from COVID-19 and the impact it had on the athletics department's budget, just because they didn't have in-person sports and all sorts of things. Gary Barta came out and announced that they were looking at at the time they thought it was like a $75 million plus deficit, and that
big number there.
Right, yeah, because of that, he said they were going to eliminate 4 sports, so 3 men's sports, 1 women's sports. It was like the men's swimming and diving, women's swimming and diving, men's tennis, and men's gymnastics. Obviously, this created quite an outcry. There still is a pretty large group of people who want to sort of save Iowa, save Hawkeye sports, which are pushing for the return of those men's sports that were eliminated. But one step that the women took was to file a Title IX lawsuit, accusing the University of Iowa of not only, being out of compliance in their actions here specifically to eliminate the women's swimming program, but saying that they have been out of compliance for years. Because Title IX says that you have to offer the same percentage of athletic opportunities, scholarships, all these things as the percentage of students enrolled in the university. So there is actually a majority for women students to men. So they have to have more women's sports is what they're arguing, or more female opportunity. So that's what this lawsuit argues. They go on for a bit, argue back and forth in court documents. A judge files a temporary injunction, sort of temporary prohibiting the university from cutting the women's. So they have to sort of forcing the university to at least temporarily reinstate the women's swimming and diving program. That prompted the university to just come out and announce they were going to permanently do it, because the judge ruled in part that they had a likelihood, the women, of succeeding at the end. And that's why she issued that temporary injunction. And so university is now looking at the likelihood they're going to lose this lawsuit. So they go ahead and do that. And then that propels, settlement talks in the background. So obviously, I forget the exact date, but last month they announced obviously that they were going to start a women's wrestling program, which they cited at the time was connected to this Title IX settlement. Director Barta said, we've been wanting to do this for a long time. We've talked about it. Obviously, this didn't seem like the right time for us because we're cutting sports, when we're looking at some losses still from last year. But saying that because of the settlement, we agreed to go ahead and do this now, and that they're still excited about it, but it's the timing, that's propelled by the settlement to do it right now. And so then the Gazette obtained the full settlement last week. So we were able to see a lot of the details beyond just starting a women's wrestling program.
So it sounds like for that swimming and diving team, the thing that kind of started this whole process, now Iowa has to keep that team for a while under the settlement, right?
Yes. Yep. That was one of the agreements. And I'm just looking at the settlement over here. But But one of the deals was that they had to agree to keep that women's program for at least 7 years. It says committed to retaining women swimming and diving for no less than 7 years.
So that would push that to 2028, right?
Mm-hmm. And obviously the women would be hoping that the program would stay longer than that. But it sounds like, and they also say in this settlement, I should note, this sort of sentence before this is that it says, while defendants do not have any current plans to eliminate women swimming and diving or any other team, that's what the settlement says, defendants commit to retaining women swimming and diving for no less than 7 years. So at least 7 years, but they also say they want to put this out there that they aren't planning to cut that sport after that or anytime soon or whatever, but at least 7 years.
And that's quite a while. When you think about, it feels like the last year has been a century. So then you look out 7 years. So then with one of the interesting things that kind of caught my eye was the cap on the rowing roster. Mm-hmm. So why is that cap? You would think maybe at first glance, oh, why would this be better for Title IX to have fewer rowing athletes? But what's kind of the reasoning behind having that cap? Because it sounds like it's actually supposed to help Title IX to have fewer rowers.
Yeah, well, that's the female athletes argument. And I just want to preface this by saying that what I'm going to tell you is the argument from the female athletes, and the University of Iowa pretty, they contend to that. They argue that they're in compliance and they don't do any of this stuff with their rowing program. But the women were saying that they sort of inflate the rowing roster. And that's where they strike that balance to try to get close to complying with Title IX, is they just put like 100 plus women on the rowing roster. You know what I'm saying? So they don't have to
probably aren't playing time for 100 plus rowers either.
That's what they argue. They argue that there are some that get sort of a JV experience, is what they called it, and that there's like the varsity team and there's JV experience. Again, the rowing coach who recently resigned said that's not true, that nobody has a JV experience. And the argument was looking at sort of what they report to the federal government, and then what is actually, even on their website, they're saying there's a mismatch there. So these formal documents they have to report to the feds show them at 100 plus or whatever. And then maybe there is actually like far fewer people actually on the team or on the roster. The university argues that's like a fluid thing, that the roster changes and ebbs and flows as they recruit and as people actually sign up or whatever. So they're saying they don't do that. But the idea behind the cap is that they want to stop the university from being able to use rowing as sort of a scapegoat, like a way to like get all their female women in there and that they're sort of in compliance with Title IX or whatever. They say, do rowing, that's great, but then also create this women's wrestling program. They have a woman there that wants to get a rugby team for women. There's the idea of like ice hockey is a thing for some schools for women. So they want them to actually provide more legitimate female athletic opportunities and scholarships.
Now, does the settlement take steps there? I think a lot of people, considering how excited people were for Extreme Arena, I think there would be a lot of interest, especially around like a women's ice hockey. Was there anything in the settlement in particular that makes it kind of that leads maybe that next step to have more women's teams added in the future?
Wrestling is the only one that's really named specifically. Of course, and maybe you were going to get to this, but they do have this appointment of a new Title IX compliance monitor, who they said will work with them for at least the next 3 years to help them figure some of this out and make sure that they're in compliance. Maybe he might suggest something like along those lines. I'm not sure, but again, this settlement only mentions the sports that it specifically mentions are women swimming and diving, wrestling, and rowing, as having something to do with. Yeah.
And then leading right into my next question there about the monitor, like mind reading there.
Yeah.
So how does that work? So the person right now is at Tulane, right?
Yes, his name is Gabriel Feldman. And I think he has kind of an interesting, I'm going to see, I pulled it up here, but he has kind of an interesting background in a lot of stuff that he's done. Yeah, he's at Tulane, but he also is like currently on the Drug Testing Appeals Committee for the NCAA. He is a reporter for the NCAA, I think, on uniform, on its new like name, image, and likeness committee. He's got like a long sort of history. He's actually a legal analyst for the NFL Network.
Wow.
So he's got kind of an interesting, resume here. And yeah, I mean, my understanding, and I could be wrong, but that he's obviously going to stay at Tulane and then continue like doing all of this array of work that he's doing, but that he also is going to monitor UI's Title IX compliance. And it breaks it down. It says he's gonna monitor that for three specific aspects. So equal participation opportunities, equal benefits and treatment, and then equal scholarship opportunities. And then it says though, but within that, like within the equal benefits, it's going to have sort of a quote laundry list of items. So he's going to do all that. And then he's going to be very transparent, it says, about any Title IX failings that he comes across. And the university athletics department has to put this annual report that he'll produce on its website no later than October 1st of every year. And so the first report we can expect next October in 2022.
Oh, wow. So that's going to be one busy guy there doing all of those things.
I know. Yeah.
I was thinking as I was hearing that, wow, each one of those would be like a full-time job, let alone all of those.
Right. And it doesn't spell out exactly how he's going to be doing his monitoring, whether he's going to be on scene, digging through records himself and meeting with people, or relying on the university to report things to him. I don't know. It doesn't break it down.
Okay.
In terms of how. And I have reached out to him just as a side note for an interview or to kind of answer some of these questions, and I haven't heard back. Actually, I emailed him, but his voicemail was full, which I was like, I bet it is, because we like named him and everybody named him. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm guessing probably a busy guy now.
Yeah, I'm assuming. Maybe it was full before, but certainly full now.
Well, anything else that'd be good for people to know about this Title IX settlement?
I mean, just this was actually, the students who sued were not going after money. They were going after the changes that they want to see on campus and for female athletes. But I just should note that as part of the settlement, the university has agreed to pay the court costs and fees for the students. So that amounted to about $400,000.
So when people see that number, it's not like they're all of a sudden like, oh, we're going to make some money here. No, it's the legal costs there that come with something as large as this.
Yes. Yeah, I should know. I mean, obviously, people have, talk about how much the university is paid in settlements of late. And they're obviously in a separate sort of civil rights related lawsuit, with the former football players and things like that. So there's all of that. But I did request the actual budgets for those sports that were cut. And they aren't actually very high. Like they're modest because they're, smaller Olympic sports. And so I just should note the 2021 operating budget for men's gymnastics was $610,000, so.
Oh, wow. So they're
not
paying
much more than
almost as much in settlements as they would in a year to keep one of those sports.
Yeah. And men's tennis, it was 643,000, so I mean, it's just that's kind of part of the contention, for those proponents of those sports to be returned, that they say you didn't have to go this route, and they're trying to raise money and everything. So again, that's not a lot of money for the university athletics department, that $400,000, but again, it's about as much as they were paying to keep one of those sports. So, yeah.
Wow. And you were mentioning the other lawsuit, the racial discrimination one. There's some news with that last week as well, right?
Yeah, that was more related to that's on track for trial. They indicate in the legal documents they're actually not engaging in significant settlement talks at this time. But that was more about they do these things, called depositions on the way to trial, where they get the main sort of witnesses and the people involved to sit down and sort of give them all the information and answer all their questions so that they can prepare for trial. And they request documents. It's called discovery, all this stuff. And the plaintiffs, so the former athletes, are asking DUI for a lot of documents and to do these depositions, and they want them done in a timely way because they want to be able to get their stuff in order. But the university, so they sort of put out this request to do their depositions like October next week or whatever their bye week is at the end of this month. And they were like, no, we're in the middle of the football season. We can't do your depositions right now because it takes time. And so anyway, it was some of that back and forth, like the university accusing these plaintiffs of harassment, literally saying, stop bothering us with this right now. We told you we can't do it right now. And them saying, well, they don't get special treatment because they're playing their football coaches and they make the big bucks or whatever. So it's some back and forth. But the judge did just decide that we're going to do this after the football season because you want to get meaningful stuff. You don't want them to rush this process. And the trial isn't actually set until 2023. So she's like, there's plenty of time. Nobody's getting shorted any fair process or due process or whatever. Just saying it makes the most sense. But she also sort of said, to take the plaintiff's side, like, we don't think they're harassing you. I'm not accusing them of harassing as the university is. I'm just saying it makes the most sense probably for everybody to just wait until January.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. I really appreciate this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me anytime.
Well, we will be back with another edition of Hawk Off the Press. We'll be back to me and Mike after the game Saturday for an edition of After the Final Score. Until then, I will talk Hawks later.